Great.
And there are a lot of emotions and very understood. I mean, so many people are freed from prisons. So many people are going back home, are being able to go back home, whether from inside Syria or from outside. And freedom, it's something that is, life loses its value without it. So we just have, I mean, maybe that's not the time, especially for Syrian. They need to take a moment to celebrate. But I think quickly people should switch to start understanding what happened and learn from previous experiences, and take the biggest challenge, which is of the day after. Again, it's a moment to celebrate, but it's also a moment to understand what happened, because that's the only way you can deal with it. And two, learn from previous similar experiences. And three, tackle the biggest challenge that is starting now, actually, which is the day after. In terms of what happened, definitely this would not have happened without the revolutions, and every Syrian who worked against oppression and helped exhausting this regime and easing its collapse should be, I mean, proud of what they have done, of that effort. But the truth of the matter, it did not happen because of the revolution. It happened because of external deals and arrangements. Especially it happened that fast because of external arrangements. I personally never optimistic about things that come from outside, because I know that countries are not charity organization. They have their agendas, and their agendas is not necessarily your agenda or the agenda of the people. Most of the time, it runs against actually the agenda of the people. Because if country go out and do things for you, they become charitable organization, and they're not. They're pursuing their interests. So it happened because of arrangements. Maybe it has been so long in the making, because, I mean, these factions, they have hundreds of millions of dollars they manage. I mean, where they're coming from? And whoever pays dictates. I mean, so that's number one. People should, while they should be proud of what they have done, they should realize that this happened and happened fast because of arrangements and deals that we are still discovering. Maybe some of them are part of the Lebanese deal. Maybe it was part of the deal that was not announced, which is for this to happen, and then to cut off the line, the corridor or whatever, the connection between Iran and Lebanon, etc. Maybe, because Assad was given last chance, was offered two things and he refused. One is to normalize the relationship with Turkey, and number two, to distance himself completely, not partially, from Iran, which basically to do the job that is being done now. And maybe he was hesitant or reluctant. It's not because he is a good man or patriotic or anything, but maybe it's because he was stupid for one reason or another. So we're gonna have to put things in perspective and don't fool ourselves and build things that exist only in our minds. That's number one. Number two, we have seen this film many times before, and it is about time to be realistic. And while, as I said, people, they have all the rights to celebrate, and we share this with them. It's very emotional. We have witnessed this in Tunisia. We have witnessed it in Egypt. I mean, it's a moment that is like a dream come true, something that you thought it's impossible, and you see it happening. So you're gonna have to understand and share that emotions, but at the same time, as they say in sports, you celebrate and then you go back and start practicing for the next game, especially if you are in a tournament that you want to win. We have seen this film times and again before. People remember in 92 when the Afghan Mujahideen entered Kabul, it was a moment of euphoria. I don't want to mention the collapse of Shah and the victory of the Iranian Revolution. Also, it was received by Arabs and Muslims, many places, etc. But even recent time, we have seen the collapse of Saddam and the statue of Saddam collapsing, like we see now the statue of Assad collapsing or brought down. We have seen the revolutions in Libya entering Tripoli, and it was a moment of euphoria and collapse of Gaddafi regime. We have seen the collapse of the regime in Tunisia, when people start thinking that the skies is the limit, we're going to do everything, we're capable of doing everything, and things are going to be rosy and different, etc. We have seen it in Egypt, celebration in Tahrir Square, etc. Where this, and Yemen, of course, where these countries are now, that's what you need to ask yourself the question. And also, if you want to go back, we have seen, or we were told, that this happened in every Muslim, in every Arab countries or every Muslim countries when they get rid of the colonization, the independence movement. The independence moment was celebrated big time. And then people went home, they thought mission accomplished, and then they found themselves dealing with notorious dictators and corrupt regimes. So history tells us that we are people who are good in knowing what we don't want. We know what we don't want, but we failed 100% miserably when the time comes to build what we want. So we know how to protest, we know how to oppose, we know how to do relief work, we know, and the Syrian has done it like other people. They've done it in an amazing way. But unfortunately, history tells us that we have 0% success record in the phase two, in the transition and building what we want. Today, I'm sorry to say I'm not very optimistic because in Syria, it's even much more complicated. Syria has the issue of geography, and we already see the Israelis already playing there. They've been playing and they occupy, and their part has the curse of geography more than any other countries maybe. Plus, it's sectarian, and there is a lot of history of revenge or hatred because this Alawite minority oppressed everybody and was very, very bloody and very cruel in dealing with other Tawaif or other sects, marginalizing them, oppressing them, etc., and then taking almost every privilege for the minority. That's going to leave a lot of hatred or revenge or issues. So it's going to be the Syrians require a miracle to make it work. Because when you have 100% record of failure before, after independence, and after the collapse of regimes in the Arab Spring, you won't be very optimistic. And then when you see the extra factors in Syria, the extra problems nowadays, internally, forget about external, there are different agendas. I don't know how they're going to be sorted out because Turkey, Russia, Iran, Israel, everybody has an agenda in Syria. How they're going to sort it out, that's probably the key. But also even internally, it's not the dream of every Syrian is not the same. Some people today, they want to establish an Islamic state. Some people, they are dreaming of democracy and democratic state, etc. So when time comes to some people, they are dreaming and planning and maybe arranging is just to replace Assad. That's it. Just to be in his place. So we don't know exactly what is being planned because we know that these countries are not independent. And these regimes, they are put in place to serve a certain function. And when they fail to fulfill that function, they will let go. You just unplug, like the happened in Assad. You just unplug it and then collapse immediately because they have no legitimacy. They have no accomplishment. They do nothing to people. So they are there because of fear and because of oppression. And the moment those their sponsors realize that they're gone, they're exhausted, their due date is expired, they just unplug them and they fall. I mean, Ben Ali, 23 years, nobody thought, I mean, this is a regime that was, and collapsed in 3 weeks. Assad collapsed in less than that, Mubarak, etc. So the moment you unplug from outside, and then the security forces and the military unplug from inside, the regime collapses. So we have seen before that these regimes, they are let go when they are expired. And we have seen before that the alternative is ready, that the arrangements of the day after, it's not the people that they do it. The people do their best to topple the regimes, but the outside forces and the movers and shakers, internal lobbies, whoever, the movers are the ones who prepare the arrangement afterwards. I hope this Syria becomes the exception. I really dream and hope, and they manage to manage their differences, because nowadays you have sects and you have different groups, including those who are together now, united against Assad. They fought against each other before, just in recent years. So when it comes to the struggle of power, you have different factions, you have different sects, and they have different agendas, and weapons is everywhere, and geography is complicated. So there isn't really very solid ground for optimism. We can only pray and hope that somehow the Syrians will learn the lessons from all the people before, and will read the moment clearly that it's not mission accomplished. No, it's just a door that is opened for you to build a solid, successful, independent country, etc., and make real development and real prosperity and real progress, etc. That's the moment you're gonna. This is the moment. The beginning of the journey, not the end, because all the time we think this is the end, and we celebrate prematurely, and we end up, and then we wake up when it was too late. So that's my assessment. Again, I know this is not the best time for it. I'm still hoping that I turn out to be wrong. But I had this discussion with Tunisians in 2011. And then people, of course, nobody's willing to listen to anything. And then after a few years, I start hearing the word, you know what, I think you were right. And that kept increasing. It doesn't mean that I'm genius or I see things, but there are just some reading here and there, and some rules that I don't go in politics by the news. I go by the rules that govern politics. And I very firmly believe that no Arab countries is independent. And all the regimes that they are brought with a deal. So the same deal that brought Assad is going to bring the people after him. It's to do certain function, and in return, you enjoy the power and the privilege of it. But make sure nothing changes. That's the deal. The deal that every regime came in the Arab world, especially, because that's the one that I'm more familiar with, and many Muslim countries, is that you come to power, you enjoy it, you keep these people under control, and you make sure nothing major changes, and our interests are not affected. That's your function. As long as you are capable of doing it, you have our support and protection. The moment you expire, we let you go and bring somebody else who will continue the job. And sorry if I spoiled anybody's happiness or celebration.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Oh, I think the way that it started, and when I got into I think we all somehow in an agreement of the same, almost similar concerns about like what's going to happen the next day. But in the meantime, I really think, or if there is something to argue, and it's more like a question, it's not an argument. It's about like people, the resistance, or all where this started from. It's people were looking for a change, and the disappointment of those people if something else, or to anticipate something else and start talking about it like now and right now, it seems like defeats the whole purpose of this whole thing. Uh, there must be a different way to keep people optimistic about like how to continue this change to the better. Because if every time we go through something like this, and we all in the Arab world, we all going through the same problems, but it's a little bit more complicated in when you have all of these different sects, especially countries like Syria, Lebanon, all of those two countries are very complicated compared to everybody else. We in Palestine we have Christians, Muslims, but that's it, and we have the Israelis and the occupation. But it's like how you give hope and to make a change to be better and be more influential and to build on all of these mistakes that's happened somewhere else. So I meant to say, like we should give a credit. It's like there is a credit that needs to be given to those who I cannot identify as real resistant groups, people who wanted the change, and there is to be careful of to identify as well, which I really don't know, all of the outsider groups that are in Syria already, and the influencers of the outsiders. Like you have it's like the most recent. Like now we're talking about Turkey, U.S., and Israel, and how to maintain the boundaries of Syria, which I think you mentioned this already. To maintain the country boundaries and unity without dividing the country, and making sure that Israel doesn't gain more ground than what they deserve, because everything is about they can come up with an excuse. It's our security and we need a buffer. And that's all what it takes to just get in.
Israel already achieved two major goals. One is, of course, the cutting the line or the connection between Iran and Lebanon. That's happened already. And then expanding in Golan and other places, they're going to expand. They're going to create some buffer zone and get some more lands from Syria. That's what is start happening. Not even what to expect. The answer to this question is easy, but unfortunately, it is easier said than done. The only way for any of those countries to get out of this dilemma and out of this vicious cycle, is for a leadership or a core group to emerge and to get rid of all the other affiliation, like ideologies and sects, and you are Syrian, and you talk about Syria and the future of Syria and Syrians, and leave your ideology for yourself, because ideologies divide people, don't unify them. For a leadership or a group or a core group to emerge, especially in Syria now in this transition moment, and to get rid of all these affiliations and use a very simple national, patriotic, civic or civil discourse and vision, develop that vision, sell it, and keep the momentum and the mobilization that was against the regime, and with the objective of toppling the regime, you say, you know what, the job is not done yet. Now we're going to start a bigger battle, which is to build this dream country. How is this? It's not easy. There is no question about it. It's not easy, first of all, in the Arab world, for people to get rid of those affiliations and keep only the citizenship, the civic that we are all Syrians, we are on board of this ship, and we're going to make it work. And then everybody keeps their ideology for themselves. And if you have an ideology, when we have a democracy, you can turn it into a platform and establish a civil party or civic party, and then enter elections. But we don't want to hear Islamic or communist or socialist, or because that's not going to help us. Turn those beliefs into policies, put it in a political platform, form a party, and enter the democracy, because this way we can manage our differences. When ideology comes in, it becomes either me or you. We can't coexist, because there is one who has the absolute truth and sees everybody else as wrong. I am the only Muslim and you are kafir. I am the only patriotic and you are traitor. We can't build a country like this. So that's, unfortunately, it's easier said than done. Usually people, they don't find it easy to take off that ideological. I mean, forget about what you see, this attempts, this makeup now that is being put by Nusra and others, and trying to have a new look and etc. That's all superficial. And sometimes they cannot even do it right. Yeah. But to have somebody with that national vision of development and building a solid country in which there is transparency, accountability, equal opportunity, there is peaceful civic engagement, real democracy, etc. And not only democracy, because a lot of people are interested in their lives, not just in the political side, and dignified or dignity for people, and decent life for people, and opportunities, and etc. I don't see this happening anytime soon, because what I'm expecting is people, they always find it easy to fall back to their ideological affiliation. I mean, we're going to see great moments in Syria in the next few days and weeks. People will tell you, we all forget about our differences. We are Syrian, we are brothers. Whatever happened in the past, we have seen this. We have seen this in Egypt. We have seen it in Tunisia. We have seen it in Libya. We have seen this. But I'm talking about after those few weeks, when it comes to who's going to govern and who's going to get what, and what type of government and what type of system we're going to build. That's where things start turning south.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
This is Nidal. I don't know if you, Doctor, answered this question before, but I just joined a few minutes ago. Now, what the question in my mind is the following. Now, talking about revolution in Syria or any revolution, when we see, like, let's say 13, 14 years ago, when it started, we said, and it kind of, it didn't, I won't say failed, but a lot of people died and everything. We said, why did the people in Syria start this revolution while they are weak? And Rasulullah used to, he said to Ali Yasir, Sabran ala Yasir, inna maw'idakum al-jannah, because it was not the time for him to fight or whatever, or announce whatever. Now, after 13, 14 years, now we see the same people winning the battle, and people would say, yes, like, even if we are small, we need to fight, you need to, like, oppose the regime and everything, because كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة, or وما رميت إذ رميت ولكن الله رمى. So Allah will help us. Now, what is the good time for people? Let's say I just want, this is a question in my mind. What is the best people for time for people to say, now I want to um, uh, ask for my freedom, when we have a bad leader, or no, it's not the time, I need to wait until I become more stronger, something like that.
It's always the calculations of the good and the harm. And of course, it's only estimate. Nobody knows the future, but people have to weigh the benefits and the harm. If toppling a regime or making a step that we're going to cause more harm than good, then Islamically you should not do that. Now, when it comes to Syria, the Syria revolutions was great, very inspiring, and probably was on its way to be one of the best, one of the most inspiring in history, because this is a very brutal regime, very bloody, and here you have people who are demonstrating peacefully and didn't care even if they were killed or whatever. The failure in the Syrian revolution, in my opinion, was when they committed all three big mistakes, kabair. One, allowed it to become militarized, whatever. Maybe the regime wanted to push it in that direction, but they fell into the trap. So one, when it is not peaceful anymore. Two is you seeking help from outside. That's bad. And three, want to get the result immediately. I mean, you allow a regime to establish itself for decades, and then you want only in a few weeks to get rid of it. Unfortunately, these combined led to what we saw afterwards. And it's always the problem of leadership. And of course, the biggest, the fourth kabira or big mistake is for ideologies to enter in, and it's no longer a Syrian revolution, but different ideologies and different factions needed to push it in their direction. So they started the power struggle even before achieving the goal of freedom. And so there was no leadership in place to say, this has to be gradual. I said it at that time, and some people know, I discussed with people when I said that you reach a point in Syria when you snatch that margin of freedom from this brutal regime. That's a great achievement. It's the time now to try to protect it, not to gain more territories, because it's not always gaining more territory is the best idea. Sometimes protecting what you gain is should be the goal. I said this, you know what, when 700,000 people gathered in Hama, the second or third largest city, and not brought down, and the next day the regime was forced to take the statue of the Assad father, Hafez al-Assad. I said, this is very symbolic. That's a big achievement. When you 700,000 people gather in a city, and then the regime next day found themselves, a regime like this, it's not any regime, and found themselves forced to take that statue. But unfortunately, there wasn't any, it was a spontaneous revolution with no leadership. And then when the politicians got in, they messed it up. They messed it up by committing all those mistakes. They got ideology in place. They went out to seek help from outside sources. And then they tried to speed up, because many of those politicians, the only thing that they want is to be in the place of Assad. It's not an issue of democracy or their country. Their problem with the regimes is just they want to be in their place. That's unfortunately a lot of Arab politicians. Their problem with, it's not with dictatorship. They just want to be there. So it's very important. We ended up, but to answer your question, I think for people to start opposing and demonstrating against this regime was great, the right thing to do.
but unfortunately, when things are not planned, you have one side that is very spontaneous, and you have one side that is planning. It's not, it didn't work. So the regime went, Assad went and liberated a lot of terrorists and a lot of criminal and whatever, and then dragged them into this, into its territory. His territory is violence. So cannot deal with a peaceful revolution. So they managed to bring it to his territory, which is to be fighting and present himself in the world that it's me or the terrorist. So that's very unfortunate. If this was done at that time and people started some sort of negotiation and they forget about quick results, because what happened over decades will not be solved over weeks. So that's to answer your question. There is nothing wrong with the people who went out and opposed this regime and asked for demand freedom and demand dignity and etc. But it was the drifting that was bad.
Okay. Settle up here.
وإياكم إن شاء الله.
So, Dr. Ghanouchi, assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
I look at the rise of China. Of course, I don't. There was for the longest time, China was divided, and you had different emperors, and then
and
at some point,
until recently, poor.
yes, and then at some point they realized. I don't have a lot of in-depth knowledge of the influence, the British influence, and how they tried to, even weaken China even further. But I do have information on how they tried to spread, drugs among, the population, and to, weaken the society, the Chinese society. But at some point, from what I read, is the Chinese realized this and they said, no longer, and they basically united against this outside influence. Why are they able to do that? Why were they able to do that? And when it comes to us, the Arabian countries like Syria, we're not able to do that. They said enough, and they said no more influence, and they basically worked inwards, and they said basically they came to a realization that they realized what's happening. They were able to see what's happening behind the scenes, but we're not.
I'm glad you raised this question because China, for one, first of all, China, like other countries who were recently means 60s, 70s, etc., poor, and then we see what happened. Singapore was another country like this. South Korea was like this, etc. So that basically make you feel bad, but at the same time keeps hope, because there is nothing that these people had that the Arabs or Muslims do not have. So we only have ourselves to blame, because we have a huge country like China, they made it. We have a minute country like Singapore, they made it. We have India, everybody is making it. So and these people, they don't have anything that Arabs or Muslims do not have. So it's just, we have to stop making excuses and justifying failure, etc. Also, China is important from another perspective, because China suffered miserably under ideology, under communism, and succeeded with pragmatism. When there was a leader in place who is not bound by ideology and came up with this idea that we can have market economy, but still some sort of controlled, whatever, centralized state, which was at that time was thought impossible because you can have one or the other. So this Deng Xiaoping came after those communist leaders and came up with this idea that basically whatever works, let's not stick to have that narrow tunnel visions and say this is it, because that's the problem. The problem with ideology is very rigid and deprive you from that flexibility of adapting to reality. And politics is about adapting and dealing with realities, etc. Now you ask me why. I can tell you that I read so much about history and politics. I have seen politicians in other parts of the world. We have seen politicians who may have issues, the moral issues like sexual relationships, things like this. We have seen politicians who sometimes they have issue of corruption or money, etc. But we have not seen politicians, or a lot of politicians who are traitors. Unfortunately, in the Arab world in particular, that's the only category you have seen. People from different ideologies, they are ready to sell anything just to be in power. And it happened time and again. That's why they're so easy to recruit. You just tell them that we get you there, we'll get you to the palace, governing palace, and they will sign on blank check for you. And unfortunately, a lot of time we thought that some of them might be an exception, and turns out none of them is an exception. Everybody, the moment you tell them we can pave the way for you to be in charge or in power, they'll tell you, okay, show me what you want me to sign. So that's why it's not happening, because you don't have leaders who, even if they have some flaws, moral or financial or whatever, but at least they're not traitors. And then especially in the Arab world, that's unfortunately it has been always, even those who start on the right direction, the moment they are enticed with power, the moment they are ready to sell anything.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Just a quick question. You just said that, because of the ideologies, everything gets messed up. So is there any government or nation which has come up, progressed technologically and, from that point of view, which doesn't have an ideology? Like there has to be some ism somewhere in the background on which they, like a backbone, for example, Singapore, and their only goal was to acquire, to get technologically advanced and all that, same as Taiwan, same as South Korea. So my question is, we Muslims cannot do that. We have to have morality and all, a religion. We have to follow the things of a religion. So what is the solution? I mean, do you know any country, first of all?
That's a big question. Let's inshallah address next time because I have to go. But to be briefly, there is a difference between ideology and vision. Vision is needed. Ideology is not. So what you're talking about, countries that have succeeded, they had visions. They had a vision that turned into a national dream, and people were mobilized and unified to turn it into reality. That's what we need. Ideology, first of all, divides. And second, it's rigid. I mean, the Soviet Union, they were sticking to communism until they were collapsing, still sticking to it. China were sticking to communism until it was disaster. And the country was, when the millions died out of hunger. And still we cannot change it because it's our ideology. That should never be the case. In politics, you have to have a vision. Yes, you have to have principles, but don't keep your options open. As long as you don't do something wrong, keep your options open and don't limit yourself and corner yourself because of ideological ideas or principle. Inshallah, we'll come back to it next time.
I just want to make a comment. I think, we are doing Surah number 42.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to do it next week, verse number 10, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about you can have ikhtilaf, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said ikhtilaf is rahma in my ummah, but we should not cause division. There should
Okay.
be no division. So we'll talk about it.
Inshallah.
Okay, thank you. Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام جزاكم الله خير.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum.